Off the Record with the Indiana 250 is presented by Prolific. When what worked stops working, I point purpose-driven leaders to Prolific, the growth firm. They turn plans into results with full-service marketing and strategy focused on outcomes, not vanity metrics. Head to prolifichq.com to learn more.
It's important for you to have a vision for what you yourself, where you want to go with life. And it doesn't have to be, rich or a successful politician or, working in, Washington or whatever. It can be being a great school teacher. But have a great vision for yourself and then organize yourself to accomplish that. But in terms of a leader, and we've sort of talked about it before, I think great leaders have a vision for where they want to go with whatever institution they're leading, and they're very good at bringing people in to help them, and they delegate to those people and empower those people.
Yeah. Welcome to Off the Record, a podcast featuring leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, which publishes the Indiana 250, a list of the most influential business people in Indiana. Welcome to Off the Record, a podcast featuring leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, which publishes the Indiana 250, a list of the most influential business people in the state. Today, I'm joined by Al Hubbard, a legend in Republican politics who has served in 2 presidential administrations and is a powerful advocate today for both education reform and healthcare affordability. Al is a native of Tennessee and a graduate of Vanderbilt University. He also has a law degree and MBA from Harvard. Despite his Tennessee roots, Al made his name in Indianapolis, where he founded E&A Industries in 1977. E&A quietly acquires, manages, and sells companies in a diverse range of industries, from specialty chemicals and aircraft engine components to baked goods and women's apparel. They've done it all in lots of different industries. While E&A works behind the scenes, Al has been front and center in Republican politics for many decades. Over the years, he has served as chairman of the Indiana Republican Party and in the White House, first serving under George H.W. Bush as executive director of the President's Council on Competitiveness and deputy chief of staff to Vice President Dan Quayle. Under George W. Bush, Al was assistant to the president for economic policy and director of the National Economic Council. In 2017, he was the frontrunner to become Deputy Secretary of Education under Donald Trump before withdrawing from contention, which I look forward to touching on that a little bit with you, Al. Al's considerable civic and philanthropic efforts are largely today devoted to education and healthcare. He has served or serves on the boards of Hoosiers for Quality Education, the Lumina Foundation, Excel in Ed, and has served on the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. He's an advocate of charter schools and almost any policy change that gives students in K-12 a better shot at a bright future. He's also taken a keen interest in healthcare reform, as mentioned, and in 2020 founded Hoosiers for Affordable Healthcare to address the high prices Hoosiers pay for healthcare relative to other states. He got an inside look at our healthcare system as a board member of the Indianapolis-based health insurer Anthem, now, of course, known as Elevance Health. And he recently retired after a long run from the Simon Property Group Board of Directors. Al, you've had a storied career and are still going on lots of important fronts for our state and for our city. But welcome to Off the Record podcast, and thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for the invitation. Great to be with you. And congratulations on how well the IBJ is doing.
Oh, well, thank you. We're working at it every day for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I always like starting at the beginning. And as I mentioned in the intro, you grew up in Tennessee, you attended Vanderbilt University, but talk a little bit about growing up in Tennessee and what were your younger days like in Jackson, Tennessee?
Well, Jackson at the time was about 30,000 people, and this will show you how old I am. It was still racially divided. We didn't go to school with blacks. There was the black school system and the white school system. But there were only 2 high schools in our town, and one was black and one was white. And the great news about that was I went to school with every socioeconomic group, and those were my friends. And we never thought about where you came from or what your parents did. We were just all friends. We played sports together. Unfortunately, blacks, we had segregation, but there was no segregation when it came to the socioeconomic part. My dad was a doctor, and, it was, when I look back on it, and I think we all tend to do this, it was sort of an idyllic situation. We, crime, we used to ride our bicycles to school and never locked our bicycles. We never locked, our homes were, we never locked up our homes. I mean, there was very little crime. It was it was a great, great environment.
Well, I mentioned some of the things that you went on to do, of course, serving in high levels and business and in politics and government. But in the early days growing up in Tennessee, was there something in your childhood or, adolescence where you could have pointed to, yeah, I might end up in business and running and buying and selling companies, or I might end up at a high level in the political circles. Was there something early on that kind of clicked in you and said, I want to do some pretty big things in life?
Oh, well, I will say, this is when I was in the 6th grade, we had a mock UN, and I played Nikita Khrushchev. And again, this is going to show my age. And I took my shoe off and beat it on my desk to act like Nikita Khrushchev. But that made me, and so the Soviet Union was the country I represented, so I had to study up and write a paper on the Soviet Union. And that really began my interest in public policy and politics. And from then on, I read the newspapers, I paid attention, and from then on, I had a great interest. And I always had an aspiration to get involved in the political world. But my idea was to first try to be successful in business. And as I mentioned to you, I was really originally going to go to med school, and we had a next door neighbor who was in business, and I found it fascinating and watching him, and it made me think about business.
Yeah. Your example of Nikita Khrushchev pounding the shoe on the podium. I was a student of Soviet and growing up in the 80s.
I remember that.
And so I was always mesmerized about the geopolitical situation and how such a huge group of the world population could be living under just terrible circumstances and lack of freedoms that we enjoy. And I was absolutely engaged by the same things, even though it was maybe a decade or two later. So I can understand that interest was that was what we were living with every day, the possibility of nuclear war, which was real, was absolutely real during those times. So you decided, you graduated from Vanderbilt, decided to not go the medicine route, but go the business route. What was, after graduation, what was your first job? What did you do after graduation?
Well, I went to Harvard and got an MBA and a JD, and then I wanted to go into business for myself. And one of my best buddies from Harvard, he and I looked at going into business together, and we finally decided, hey, we need a little more experience before we jump in.
Yeah.
So I went to Memphis and started interviewing. I actually interviewed with Fred Smith when he was just starting FedEx. And by the way, he did not offer me a job. And I told Fred later, I said, Fred, that was the biggest mistake he ever made.
Or maybe it was a good opportunity because maybe you wouldn't have done it. Maybe you'd have been running FedEx and not have all these other experiences.
So anyway, I ended up working for a mini conglomerate in Memphis and was assistant to the president and basically worked with their problem divisions. And I did that for 14 months. And then this buddy from Harvard, who was in Indianapolis then, he called me up and said, hey, he called me Hubbs. He said, Hubbs, quit your job, move to Indianapolis. I think I can buy this company and let's do it together. So I was single. I quit my job. I guess I was 29 and moved to Indianapolis. And anyway, our deal fell through, but here I was. And we decided we're going to find something else to do.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I had a blind date with my wife and everything. And that turned out to be obviously a great thing.
Yeah. So the first company that you ended up, did you end up with that same person in buying into a company, after the one didn't work out?
I did.
You found what was that first company that you?
It made car waxes and polishes.
Okay.
It had 2 employees. It had annual sales of $60,000,
Wow.
and we paid $25,000 for it. And my partner took out, and by the way, my partner, unfortunately, he's passed away. He was Todd Houston's uncle.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
And
world.
I met Todd Houston when he was like 4 years old.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So anyway, he and I did this together, and he took out a second mortgage. He had 3 kids, took out a second mortgage where we could buy this little company for $25,000.
And that was the start of E&A.
That's right.
And that was that 1977?
1977,
when
June of 1977.
The unofficial start of E&A.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. And it's interesting because so I was fortunate enough when I practiced law to represent private equity firms that would acquire. They were industry agnostic. They would acquire a business as long as they thought they could take it to the next level.
Right.
Didn't matter what sector it was in. And it sounds like that you and your partner in those early days, you didn't really care much about what the sector was. You just thought, is this a business that we can scale and grow?
That's exactly right.
And I know over the years, E&A has acted much like that, right? I mean, you've looked at lots of businesses, you've bought businesses. Is that the philosophy that you and your partners that you've had through the years have taken? Is it industry agnostic, and we just want to find something we think we can really grow?
Yes, we've always been opposed to getting involved in technology because we're not technologists ourselves, and because of innovation, you can have the best mousetrap today and be the second best mousetrap tomorrow. So we've avoided that, but otherwise, yes, we just looked for opportunity, and we've been in a lot of different things. And by the way, we've never had outside money, so it's just whatever we've been able to accumulate along the way.
You've never opted like what's thought about as a traditional private equity fund where you actually go out and raise a fund.
Right.
You've run an office, but you've always put your own dollars at risk, not somebody else's.
And therefore, we've never had, we're a typical, virtually all private equity firms, they buy with the idea of selling in 5 to 7 years, and we never have a requirement that we've got to sell in a certain amount of time. We hold a company as long as we think it makes sense to keep holding it.
There's a couple of stories I've heard through the years, probably from talking to you, talking to Devin Anderson, who I know you've worked with for many years at E&A. One of them was it a Greek yogurt or something close to that you hit like right at the right time in the marketplace? I'm trying to remember. It was some kind of food product.
Yeah, it was Udi's gluten-free bread. Yeah,
that's what it was. It was gluten-free.
We were the first people we bought a company that was a granola company, and they had this little bitty operation making this gluten-free bread. And it happened to be the first bread on the market that actually gluten-free bread that actually tasted like bread. And so we acquired it, and it was based in Denver. Devin became the CEO. And in 2 years, it went from $6 million to $100 million in sales.
Unbelievable.
I mean, it was just
That's good timing because that was gluten-free. It was becoming a thing.
Yeah, and it just went crazy. And we had big supermarkets coming to us. I mean, how often did that happen?
It's nice when that happens.
Yeah, no, we were very, very lucky.
That's the part about being in business where anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
That you could never have predicted that. You saw something in the marketplace that you thought was unusual, that was niche.
Right.
But you never know that in business. That's it's one of the things that for me is exhilarating about being in business is you never know what's going to catch fire. When it does, it's exciting and you can grow and
right. And it also can cut the other way, too.
It can cut the other way. And it has. I'm sure in your experience, it has for me, too.
Yeah.
But the other one I always remember, because I just remember this being, I think, a pretty famous brand. Was it Gilchrist and Soames?
Right.
That was the hotel shampoos and lotions and so forth.
Yeah.
And you owned that at one period,
for
maybe a long period of time.
Yeah, we owned it for about 9 years, I think.
Yeah.
And again, Devin did it. And yeah, it was, we were made the shampoos and body lotions for high-end hotels.
Yeah.
And we sort of, I would have to say, again, we were lucky, but we were the high end.
Yeah.
And through packaging and product quality and fragrance and all that. So we, it was a way for a hotel to enhance its sort of brand.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And in many cases, you would, after acquiring a company, in many cases, you would move some of their operations or their headquarters to Indianapolis. Is that true?
Right. Yeah. With Gilchrist and Soames, it was actually being made in England.
Okay.
And we moved it to Indianapolis. And I mean, it's a great example of how your life is a long learning process. We'd been in the specialty chemical business, so we thought, and we know how to fill products, fill bottles, but we'd filled gallon bottles and 5-gallon bottles, never little 2-ounce bottles and 1-ounce bottles. So we moved the operation from England to Indianapolis, and it was a total disaster.
Is that right?
Oh my goodness. We finally learned how to do it, but it was a total disaster. Yeah.
Those are the parts of the learning experiences. But Indiana has benefited from your team, you and your team's willingness to relocate jobs here, and which is wonderful. It's been a nice benefit for the city. And
it's a great place to do business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to turn. I know you've been involved in business for many years and still are, but when I want to talk about your engagement in politics and the Republican Party in particular. But when did you first? I know you mentioned the UN when you were in 6th grade experience, but what was your first real diving into the political world? When did that take place?
Well, what happened was when I went into business, I was 29, and I said to my partner, Ed Klink, Todd Houston's uncle, I said, Klink, I called him Klink. He called me Hubbard or Hubs. I said, Klink, in 10 years, if we're doing well, I'd like to take a year off. And he said, that'll be fine. So 10 years later, we were doing okay. And so I said, hey, Klink, can I take a year off? And he said, sure. And so at the same time, I got an invitation to be the campaign manager for a guy named Pete DuPont, who was sort of a former governor of Delaware and running for president in 1988. And Kath was pregnant with twins, and we had a 1.5-year-old boy. And so we decided to move to Wilmington, Delaware, where I would be Pete's campaign manager.
Wow.
And I'd never run a campaign, but he wanted to hire me. I think he couldn't hire anybody else. Nobody else would go to work for him. And I think he thought I knew how to run a business, so, I could execute well, and they could figure out what needed to be done. And the funny story about that was the second day on the job, I get a call, and I pick up the phone, and I said, Al Hubbard, and he said, Hubs, George Bush here. And I said, George, how you doing? And he said, I'm not doing very well. And I said, why? And he said, I understand you're working against Dad. His father was vice president at the time, running for president to succeed Reagan. And I said, George, I don't view it that way. I'm here supporting Pete, but not working against your father. And he said, we're going to bury you. And when we do, I'm going to get your rear end down here to help elect Dad to be the next president of the United States.
Wow.
So 14 months later, they buried us. Bush calls, says, Hubbard, get down here. So we then moved to Washington, and I worked on the Bush campaign.
That's an awesome story. And of course, for our listeners, the reason George W. Bush called you is because you were classmates with him at Harvard. At Harvard.
That's exactly right.
At business school.
We were very good friends at Harvard Business School. Right.
And so, I mean, they always talk about the Ivies being, you don't really go there for the education. You go there for the connections and the network. I mean, that's obviously true in this case. But did you know him pretty well during?
I knew him quite well.
And did you guys have some fun together?
Oh, we had a lot of fun. And he doesn't drink. He quit drinking at 40, but he drank with. He didn't drink any more than the rest of us. Yeah. We all. Yeah. I mean, we had fun. We were single. We dated We sometimes dated the same girl. I mean,
so there's some stories you're not going to tell on the podcast.
Right.
That's awesome. So then you go to work on the campaign eventually for George H.W.
Right.
When he selects Quayle as
Right.
vice president, and then you are asked at that time to go work in that administration. Is that correct?
Actually, what happened was, Quayle talked to me about going to work for him, but we decided we would go home.
Okay.
And then about a year later, Quayle contacted me again and said, would you come out and run the Competitiveness Council, which was this new entity that was created to basically deal with overregulated economy. And so, make a long story short, we agreed to do that. So we moved back to Washington, and I worked for Quayle through the.
And then you eventually end up going back to the White House with George W. Bush, and talk about that experience. And how many years were you in that administration?
I was there 3 years, 05, 06, 07. What happened was when Bush decided to run for president, he asked Kath and me to come down and spend the night at the governor's mansion. He was governor of Texas, and he asked me then to help him prepare to run for president and to be president. And he said there are a lot of issues that I'm not that familiar with, like international economics, foreign policy, et cetera. And I would like for you to organize briefings for me where I can get prepared. And so I then contacted on our side of the aisle, Republicans, the smart people like George Shultz and Condi Rice and Bob Zellick, and then economists like Marty Feldstein and Glenn Hubbard and John Taylor to come in and brief the president, or the president-to-be, the governor at that time. And that was just a great experience. And so once Bush was elected, he asked me to come in 01, and our kids were in junior high and high school, and it just didn't make sense. And so he asked me again in 03, and then in 05, I said, Kath, we've got to do it. So I went out, and our girls were juniors in high school, and so I would commute every weekend. And then after a year and a half, they went to college, and Kath came out. So we were there for 3 years.
So what incredible experiences. As you look back on those stints at the White House in D.C., those experiences, are there one or two experiences that really stand out for you as just kind of iconic moments, or just incredible experiences that I know the whole thing had to be incredible just to be operating at that level in government, but were there a couple moments that really stick out for you?
You just keep pinching yourself, honestly. Every day you would drive to the White House. I was living in Georgetown, and it only took, you have to be there so early. It'd take me about 8 minutes. And you'd go through security, and you'd park right there next to the West Wing. And my office was literally in the West Wing. It's just above the cabinet room. So, I mean, you were meeting with different people. I remember I went to Germany to meet with Merkel, and and went to India to meet with Singh, and anyway, and you just keep pinching yourself. I mean, I was always, one of the great fun things that happened is when I was traveling with the president. Marine One, which is the helicopter, comes into the front of the White House, and he gets on Marine One, and then goes to Andrews Air Force Base, and he gets on Air Force One. And so I would go with him on Marine One and then take off. He'd go right by the Washington Monument, fly to Andrews Air Force Base, get off. I mean, it was just like, wow, this is so incredible. I mean, it was just, and then we were working on, obviously, lots of different issues. The first assignment I had was Social Security reform. And I spent a year on Capitol Hill unsuccessfully trying to get the proposals that the president had, that had they passed, we wouldn't have the big deficit problem we have today.
I was going to say, thankfully, we made so much progress since that time on entitlements.
It's just, anyway.
It's sad.
It's
but
really sad.
It's been impossible puzzle to solve so far, hasn't
it? The other thing that was sort of fun is, I mean, you could literally call anyone in the world and they'd return your call.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, really?
It's awesome. So, I've been with you. I've been fortunate enough to be in the same room with you at least once with George W. Bush, and um, when he's in those smaller settings, you realize what an incredible person and sense of humor. The sense of humor is kind of one of the most fun things, like, to be around. And I'm sure you experience that all the time. But I've been, again, fortunate to be in a few times around him, and he's just seems such a likable and a great sense of humor, which is fun to be around.
And self-deprecating. He loves to make fun of himself. Yeah. He makes fun of us as nuclear. Or I mean, right. He can't resist not being funny.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when his library, we went down for, when his library was open for the first time and had all the presidents there, Carter and Clinton and Obama and H.W. was there. And, but President Bush, 43, he just kept quips, one after another. The other thing that's great about him is he really cares about people. I mean, people to him, he hadn't been a lifetime politician, and he's always had an incredible number of close friends.
Yeah, it comes through. It came through in his leadership, for sure. Well, I wanted to touch on. I mentioned in the intro the possibility of you going to work in the Trump administration, the first Trump administration at the Department of Education. Do I have that right? Was that a thought process that you went through and you thought about it? And talk about that if that's accurate.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, it is accurate.
Yeah.
Well, I've cared about education for 40 years, probably. I mean, obviously, we all care about education, but I've been actively involved in education reform, I guess more like 30 years, 35. And, when Betsy DeVos, who is a close friend, was nominated to be Secretary of Education, she called me literally the first day and said, "Hey, why don't you be my deputy?" And, Kath and I spent time talking about it. And, I was just very interested in doing it because I thought if I can have any positive impact on giving kids, particularly K through 12 kids, an opportunity to have a better education, this is something I should do. And so I agreed to do it. I actually flew down and met with Trump, which was interesting. And then, I started going through the process, and it would have cost me multiple millions of dollars to have done it. Okay. And it just, in the end, did not make sense.
Yeah.
Because they were going to make me divest of all of my investments in these private companies. And it just didn't make sense.
It doesn't feel like President Trump necessarily has divested in all of his companies.
No, he has not. He's been acquiring. Yeah.
He's got meme coins and all kinds of things going.
Goodness.
I listened about Trump watches. I mean, he's got everything going. It's unbelievable. Well, more ahead with Al Hubbard, the head of E&A Industries, when we return to Off the Record podcast presented by Prolific. Stay with us. Most organizations hit a point where growth stalls, the message blends in, the site stops converting, the pipeline softens. That's when I tell leaders about Prolific, the growth firm for purpose-driven leaders. Through full-service marketing and strategy, they clarify the story, rebuild your go-to-market, and drive sales. Most importantly, Prolific holds itself accountable to the metrics that matter to you. If you're ready for your next growth stage, learn more about Prolific at prolifichq.com. Welcome back to Off the Record Podcast. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, and I'm talking today with Al Hubbard, a legend in the Indiana Republican Party, and of course, a big advocate of education, K through 12, and healthcare reform. And that's where I want to turn next, Al, is on the education front, a topic I know you're incredibly passionate about, K through 12 education. You've been a really strong advocate of charter schools, and all the work that's been done in this state and beyond. What do you see? I know there's been progress made on lots of fronts in the education field, but yet we all feel like, K through 12 education has more work to be done, with kids, especially male students these days, seeming to be dropping out, not being as successful in school and getting the education they need to be successful in life. What are the big things that you see that still are left to be tackled in education in general, and maybe in Indiana more specifically?
By the way, I agree with your diagnosis and assessment of the situation. Even though we've made a lot of progress, we are so far from being able to say we provide every kid in our state with the opportunity for a great education. And I think next to national security, it's the most important thing facing our country.
Yeah.
What really irritates me is when people say, well, these kids from broken homes and poor situations, they're never going to succeed in education. And that is just absolutely not true.
Yeah.
We have example after example after example of schools, both charters and privates, that successfully educate kids from very difficult circumstances. So we need to provide them with the right kind of schools and the right kind of educational opportunities. What we've been pushing for the last 30 years, and we finally have succeeded, is vouchers, where every kid in our state can choose where he or she wants to go to school, or where their parents want him to go to school. And we've also been big supporters of charter schools, as you pointed out, which are public schools that are independently operated with their own board of directors. And we've successfully, and really led by Todd Houston and the Speaker of the House, to, number one, to equalize funding for charter schools. It's not 100% equal, but much more equal than it's ever been, where part of the property taxes are now shared with the charter schools. And Todd also got passed in the last legislative session universal vouchers. So every single kid in our state can take a voucher and go to a private school. And that's really important. But we still have more to do, because the problem is, well, first off, 85% of the kids are in the traditional public schools, and the traditional public schools, for the most part, are unsuccessful.
Yeah.
And we need to focus on improving those schools. A literacy legislation was passed 2 or 3 years ago that requires, and by the way, Mitch passed it when he was governor, and then because the superintendents of public instruction didn't enforce it, it never actually was realized. And now they passed it again 3 years ago to require that phonics would be taught in terms of literacy, and that when you left the third grade to go to the fourth grade, if you could not read, then you would be held back. And the result of which is our literacy rate went up by 5 points this past year, which is a huge, I mean, nothing ever moves like that. It's usually a point or a point and a half at best. So this is showing that's right, and we need to double down on literacy.
Yeah.
And right now, I think 80-something% of our kids go on to the fourth grade. Well, we need to get it to 99%. And we just need to double down on teaching teachers how to teach the phonics, and making sure, and by the way, they should start this in kindergarten and test in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. They're now testing in second grade. So if a kid's not keeping up, they can provide more assistance. So I'm hopeful that we will make a big push on improving literacy. And then we need to do the same thing in math. We need to have standards that kids have to achieve before they go and I think the fifth grade is going to be the time where they will be measured. And if they don't achieve a certain level of accomplishment, then they're going to be held back. And because if you think about it, if every kid could read well and do basically basic arithmetic, he or she can succeed in life.
Yeah. And there were some changes made to the high school diploma requirements, right? And were you an advocate of what happened and some of those changes that happened with the high school diploma in the last couple of years?
Very much so. I mean, the high schools are really failing, particularly 12th grade. By the way, you know what the absenteeism rate for 12th graders is?
I don't.
It's 30%.
Oh, my gosh.
30% of our kids don't go to school. I mean, it's a disaster. And that's because high school is not interesting to them. And so the reform, which again led by Todd Houston, is to basically, everyone's not going to go to college. We know that. And I think we assumed everyone should go to college, and that was a bad assumption. And so we need to prepare kids to go to college. We need to prepare kids to go to trade schools or Ivy Tech and learn trades like, welding and HVAC and electricians. And then we need to prepare kids who don't want to do either, that when they graduate from high school, they're prepared to, they've got some sort of industrial certificate so they can earn a very good living as a high school graduate. Mm-hmm. So this is how, the new approach to high school, and it makes it much more interesting, and you're tailoring it to what the kid really wants to do with his or her life.
And of course, I think a part of that, I think what you're describing also, there's been a big push in this state around what they call modern day apprenticeships,
right?
Meaning giving high schoolers an opportunity to engage with industry sooner, learn a trade or whatever the industry. It doesn't have to be a trade. It could be in healthcare. It could be in banking. This is what Switzerland and some other European countries have been working on for quite some time, quite successfully. And some of those kids still go to college. Some of those kids stay at the firm that they were working at. So you're an advocate of those more experiential opportunities during
the whole work-based learning and giving kids in high school the opportunity to spend part of their day going into these companies and learning these skills.
Yeah.
And the other thing, is the idea of stackable credentials. So if you earn a particular credential and then you decide you want to go on to higher ed, then that credential will apply towards your higher ed degree.
Yeah, I've just you touched on this already, but the encouraging news on the reading front was just how much that third graders have been achieving at a much higher level. So we're making some pretty quick progress, it seems like, which is awesome.
And by the way, everyone came together on that. The Lilly Endowment put $100 million into this whole effort.
Oh, it's amazing.
Amazing. I mean, Clay Robbins, hats off to him and the Lilly Foundation for doing that.
Yeah, they're also another quiet contributor to so many different organizations and initiatives that I think they like it that way. They like being the quiet contributor, but it's incredibly important for our state and such a big opportunity that we have over a lot of states, actually.
Right. Yeah. No question. And by the way, so the third graders are being, we're focusing on them, but I'm hopeful there's going to be legislation passed in the next session that's going to deal with 4th through 8th graders, those kids who went to the 4th grade and could not read, and they're doomed to failure, because if you go to the 4th grade and you can't read, then you're not going to succeed.
They get left behind, don't they?
You're left behind. Yeah. You're not going to graduate from high school, and 70% of people in prison can't read. I mean,
that's an unbelievable statistic. I didn't realize that. That's an unbelievable statistic that tells you all you need to know.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. One area I wanted to ask you about, because this one seems concerning. This statistic seems concerning to me. Others seem to not think it's concerning. I'm curious on your perspective, and that is, we as a state now have 51% of our high schoolers deciding to go on to higher education. That's down from, I think, only 5, 6, 7 years ago, closer to 65%.
That's exactly right.
We've dropped substantially in that. Doesn't mean, and that statistic may not catch some that decide to go back to school after a few years out, but it does seem quite alarming to me, to the extent we as a state hope to have high-paying jobs of the future, want to keep growing our biotech and our pharma business in this state, want to attract the talent and keep talent. It from a Hoosier state progress perspective, it is concerning to me. Is it concerning to you, or should I be less concerned?
No, you should be very concerned, just like I am. No, it's a major problem. And if you think about it, I mean, from an economic development perspective, it's a problem because we're not going to have skilled workforce. But from human capital, the humanity side of it, these people who don't go beyond high school, they're not going to have successful lives more than likely.
Yeah.
And they're going to, and we owe it to them to provide them with an education that's going to lead to excellent jobs.
Yeah. My fear is that so many of these folks are just dropping out, or not, like to your point, are not going to be able to keep up with what the skill requirements are going to be of the future if they've just stopped the learning process. They're stopping the education process. And I know we're both lifelong learners, and it's so important to us. But if we don't give and the people that opportunity to continue their learning, I fear that's going to harm us in the long run.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think part of it is this literacy and numeracy or math. That if you get to high school and you're not good at math and you're not good at reading, then you're going to be bored with high school.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't want to go anywhere after high school.
Yeah.
And so I think if we do a better job of educating our kids, it will have a dramatic impact on post-secondary.
And you mentioned that some kids are just losing interest, and that makes me think that's even more a reason, like losing interest in high school, even more a reason to provide them with experiential opportunities that can turn into hopefully something that sparks, gosh, this is something I could be good at, I could want to learn more about. And I think more of those kids, that might be getting bored if they had the opportunity to go to work and learn from those that they're employed by during the high school years. Maybe a big part of the answer.
I think it's a big part of the answer too.
Yeah.
I mean, some people are made to. I mean, they're going to succeed in life using their hands.
Yeah.
And by the way, and those jobs aren't threatened by AI.
Right.
That's
right.
what,
Right. Exactly. No, exactly.
What you and I do is threatened by AI.
Yeah.
That's what.
Right.
For long, the IBJ is going to be produced by AI.
I kid my editor, Leslie, like, can't we just replace all these reporters with AI? She doesn't like that very much. So I want to turn to another topic. Education, I know, is one that's a passionate topic for you, but also just as passionate is the healthcare and rising costs of healthcare in Indiana, but certainly in general. But you were so passionate about it, you decided to found an organization, Hoosiers for Affordable Healthcare, back in 2020. And I know because I follow it closely, IBJ's followed it closely, that there's a concern that the organization and you share that is the lack of competition in healthcare. Meaning, we got these big hospital systems, and they're gobbling up all the many of them are nonprofit, not all, but a lot of them are nonprofit. Talk about how the approach that Hoosiers for Affordable Healthcare have taken. I know there's been some more recent legislation. Are we making progress? Do you feel like we're starting to peel back the onion enough? I mean, the healthcare for so many people, including myself, is such a complicated picture. You've seen the inside because you were on the board of Anthem. That's one component. You obviously know what we're all experiencing as Hoosiers and Hoosier companies that I experience, and with different companies I've been involved in, and as a consumer. So what do you think has any progress been made, and what really needs to happen to really make like ultimate progress, create a competitive market, create more transparency? How do we attack that as a state?
Well, first of all, it's very frustrating, and the U.S. spends close to 20% of our GDP on healthcare. I think it's 19 point something or another.
Yeah, and
the next highest for developed countries are around 13%. I think it's perhaps Switzerland. So I mean, we're spending 50% more. And you can't say our healthcare system
outcomes aren't 50% better, are they?
They certainly are not. In fact, they're not as good. My original thinking was we need to create a competitive marketplace, but I have now concluded that it's too late. I mean, you're not. We worked initially for more transparency. But the bottom line is people are not going to shop. They are not going to shop. And to be perfectly honest, the providers make it difficult. Even when we pass legislation to make it more transparent, they still successfully make it difficult to find out about what it's going to cost before I have a procedure.
incentives aren't aligned.
The incentives are not aligned.
Yeah,
You're exactly right. I mean, most people, they have third-party pay. It's what the problem is. It's third-party pay. So we view when we consume it, we think it's free, even though we're paying for it indirectly through lower wages.
Sure.
But anyway, I've now concluded that we need to be shining a very bright light on the high prices, and the real problem in our state are hospitals. Our big systems, the top 5 systems, charge 20 to 30% more than the national average. And think about it. In Indiana, our cost of living is 9% below the national average, and our wages are 12% below the national average. So why should we be paying 20 to 30% above the national average for hospital care? And my own feeling is that the leadership of our hospital systems are focused on maximizing they're nonprofits, but maximizing their bottom lines. I mean, IU Health has $10 billion in the bank that they invest in, the stock market and private equity, et cetera. And the other big systems have a tremendous amount of retained money that aren't needed to operate their facilities. And they, nonprofits are supposed to operate for the good of the community, and they're not operating for the good of the community. They're operating to maximize their returns on the investments. So anyway, I'm very frustrated with it. We did get legislation, and I hate to use the idea of price controls, but they are basically an unregulated utility because they do not have competition. When's the last time? I mean, we see ads all the time about by hospital systems. When's the last time they advertised what the price was?
Right.
Never. It never. They talk about the wonderful care they provide and the facilities, et cetera. So unfortunately, we need to shine a spotlight on them. We have had legislation passed that's going to have the state review the big hospital systems when their prices are above the national average, and we're hopeful that this will lead to lower prices. But by the way, hospital prices across the country have escalated faster.
Yeah.
I mean, so
is it
the average is out of control, and we're 20 to 30% above the average.
Yeah. So I got 2 questions. One is on like the last point you made, that hospital systems in general, across the country is escalating and is out of control. Does that mean there needs to be a federal fix, somehow, whether that's Medicare and Medicaid, pricing or strategy? I mean, is that one component? I always think that the structure of the system is inherently bad for what we're talking about from a cost standpoint. I guess that's one question. The second is Indiana unique in the number of nonprofit hospitals versus for-profit? I mean, is there something unique why Indiana is higher priced than most states? I mean, those are 2 questions that hit me as like, I'm just curious in your feedback on those questions.
Well, what is unique about Indiana? What's interesting is, so our hospital's reimbursement rate is, again, 20 to 30. These are the big guys, not the small guys, the big guys. 20 to 30% above the national average. The national average is indefensible. But our doctor reimbursements are 4th from the lowest in the country. But the result, which has been very harmful to the state, because hospital systems have been acquiring doctor practices. So no longer do you have independent doctors.
And is that unusual?
That is unusual,
okay.
and everyone agrees it is not healthy, because if a doctor is owned by a hospital system,
right, he
or she tends to refer to that hospital system.
Well, they're probably highly encouraged to do so.
Yes, they're highly encouraged to do so, and therefore less competition, less choice, and so it's very harmful.
Okay. And is there something? I mean, of course, we know that there needs to be reforms federally on all entitlement programs, but is there something that could or should be done, in your opinion, from a healthcare structural standpoint, that Congress should do to make this more of a marketplace-driven sector?
Well, when I was working for Bush 43, that it was something I very much cared about. Actually created a task force to work on that. We came up with a proposal that the president announced in the '07 State of the Union to basically where everyone would have a tax credit to go out and buy his or her own insurance. So you and which would hopefully lead to no longer being, you wouldn't be getting it from your employer, but you would get it just like you buy car insurance, And we thought it would lead to a more competitive marketplace. Well, we were unsuccessful at getting it sold in Congress. And so things have gotten worse and worse. And I think we're at a point now, I would not be in favor of the federal government doing it. I just think the federal government doesn't do anything well. Hopefully the military, they do well, but I mean, everything else is not done well. I'd rather it be done at the state level, but I think there needs to be state regulatory commissions that oversee hospital prices and hospital services, just like we do with utilities. When you don't have competition, capitalism is the best system because it controls prices through competition,
right? And
controls the quality of service and through competition. But when you don't have competition, then you've got to replace it with and it's not nearly as good as competition, but you need a regulatory commission, and I think that's what we need in healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, to your point, with utility companies, they would. Who knows what the prices would be if there's no kind of regulator, right? I mean, so it's a monopoly situation is what you're describing.
And if you think about these hospitals, they can price any way they want to because no one is reviewing their prices, and so, I mean, it's not a perfect world, but it's the more perfect of the unperfect world is we need to do that. But I would do it at the state level, not at do not get the feds involved. Yeah. The great thing about states is if you make a mistake, you can undo it.
Right.
But if you make a mistake at the federal level, it is very hard to undo it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I got so many questions on that front, but I'll move on to maybe a just as interesting question, and that is You've been in and around very effective leaders over the course of your career. Of course, we talked about working with 2 different presidents and vice presidents and leaders across business and education policy, on and on. I'm curious if your view of effective leader, what are the elements that create effective leaders, and what are the essential qualities for highly effective leaders? If your view over time has changed, if you have a common trait that you've seen that, and I know there's so many different leadership styles, and we've talked about humor as one of them with President George W. Bush, but what stands out to you, if there are any common themes in leadership that you've experienced?
Well, I think I would put as number one, the person needs to have a vision of where he or she wants to go, and needs to be able to needs to understand it for himself, but also be able to articulate it for others. And then secondly is that person needs to have the ability to relate to people well, and to empower people. I mean, I felt like Bush 43, whom I worked with extremely closely, and I thought he was a very effective president. I mean, that's not to say he didn't make mistakes. I mean, I think with hindsight, a lot of people think the Iraq War was a big mistake. But the way he operated, he made it clear what his principles were, and then you had the authority to go execute. And he did not micromanage, but you reported to him and kept him informed, and I thought he was very effective.
Yeah.
And, when I look at I've become a very close friend of a fellow named Bill Harrison, and he was Jamie Dimon's predecessor. And he's the guy that assembled all the banks to create J.P. Morgan. I mean, he started at Chemical, and then he merged with Manufacturers Hanover, and then they did Bank One, and then they did J.P. Morgan. And anyway, and Chase, they put them all together. Mm-hmm. And Bill did that, and then hired Jamie Dimon to succeed him. And of course, obviously, that was a great hire.
Yeah.
But he's got a style. He's from North Carolina. He's very Southern. He's gentle, but he has a very clear vision, and he's very good at working with other people. And I when I think about how he assembled all those banks and created the most successful bank in the world.
Yeah.
Jamie gets credit, and by the way, Jamie deserves credit, but Bill is who put it together.
Yeah.
And Bill is who picked Jamie.
Yeah.
So anyway, I feel like I've learned a lot from. And by the way, I've watched Bill. We're in a community together in Florida, and you know, sometimes he works on things that don't work out, and he accepts that. You know, it's the way it's life.
Yeah,
yeah.
You do your best, but you've been around such incredible leaders to soak up some of those lessons.
Now the other one that was something. I mean, I was around Hank Paulson for a year and a half. I mean, he's a totally different style from Bill. He is the most intense person I've ever met. But what made him successful is he was so determined when he knew where he wanted to go, and nothing was going to stop him. Nothing.
See, it seemed like he had an aim in mind, and he was going to get.
He was going to get there. I mean, he was. Yeah, that's exactly right.
One of the things I always ask our podcast guests is about mentors who have been important to you. We may have just talked about some of those folks, but is there a mentor or two in your life that you say, this is somebody that I really look to for guidance or answers or to learn from, that stand out for you?
Well, this is a bizarre answer, but if I had to say who was a mentor, it was my first partner, who was Todd Houston's uncle, a guy named Ed Klink, who went first person in his family to go to college. He went to West Point. He could have never afforded to go anywhere else. 2 tours in Vietnam.
Wow.
And, you know, he and I had the greatest partnership. And, you know, I learned a ton from him. And he was, anyway, he was very important to me.
Yeah, that's special. We share a lot in common. I have a friend who unfortunately passed early that I learned a lot from in business.
Right.
My first business venture was with him, a guy named David Hartley, and he taught me how to look at the glass more than half full versus always, because as a lawyer, you were trained as a lawyer. We always are trained. You didn't practice law, right? But no, I did, and I was always trained to make sure we were protecting the downside for our clients. And so I always started looking at the downside.
Right.
He taught me how to look at the bright side and the upside. And I had to kind of knock that risk adverse out of me a little bit. A guy named Mickey Maurer helped me do that too, but that's cool. That's a great story about your first partner. Yeah. Well, Al, we've made it to Off the Record Speed Round, where you give me some quick answers to a bunch of questions I always ask guests about, just to get to know them even more. So, and I start with your favorite movie of all time.
Oh, you'll die when you hear this. Dumb and Dumber.
I wasn't expecting that one. That's good. I did not expect that at all.
I just love that movie.
I love it. Your favorite place to vacation?
Well, it's Paris with my wife, which I think is the most romantic city in the world, and the mountains.
Yeah.
Anywhere, you know.
I love the mountains too.
We've hiked all over the world, and, you know, we love the mountains.
That's awesome. Your favorite musical artist?
Lionel Richie.
Oh, wow. Good one. Good one. What's the first thing you do in the morning, usually?
Well, I have a cup of coffee. While I'm having it, I'm doing my emails. I'll spend an hour doing emails, and then I work out. Yeah.
Awesome. And do you check your emails throughout the day, or is it just once a day?
Oh, no. I'm constantly checking it during the day.
Yeah.
No, I'm constantly. Now, what I do, I discipline myself not to check my emails in the evening.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, and if something hot's going on, then I will, of course.
Sure.
But I figure if somebody needs to get in touch with me, they will call me.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get diverted. I want to just focus on, you know.
I need to take a page out of your book on that front. Title of the last book you read, or maybe one of your favorite books that you refer back to? Oh,
the last book I read, I wrote it down. I can't remember the name of it. It was about I read about it in the Wall Street Journal about 2 or 3 months ago, so I decided I would read it. It was about the West, winning the West. And it I just finished it. It was about, it had Daniel Boone in it, Davy Crockett in it, Buffalo Bill Cody. And I mean, it was fascinating. And what was most striking, and it was distressing, to be honest, the 1800s, it was a war between the whites and the Indians. And it was not a pretty picture.
No.
Unfortunately.
Right.
I mean, and in fact, Davy Crockett, who represented Jackson, Tennessee in Congress, lost his seat because he opposed Andrew Jackson, who wanted to move the Cherokees to Oklahoma. And he thought that was inappropriate.
Yeah, the history there is amazing. Best advice that you ever received?
Oh, well, this will surprise you. The best advice I ever received was from my wife. And the advice was, you need to marry me.
That's awesome.
and she was right. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
That's awesome. I love it. And you're the first guest to say that, which is awesome. And I've had about 45, 50 of these conversations, and it's awesome that you said that. I'm going to close on this one. Advice for a young person that wants to be a leader, wants to lead an industry or lead in government or lead. What advice would you give someone who's kind of a young Al Hubbard coming up to achieve their dreams and be a leader?
Well, by the way, I don't feel like I've been very lucky. I don't feel like I've been especially super successful, but I think it's important for you to have a vision for what yourself, where you want to go with life. And it doesn't have to be, rich or a successful politician or, working in, Washington or whatever. It can be being a great school teacher, but have a great vision for yourself and then organize yourself to accomplish that. But in terms of a leader, and we've sort of talked about it before, I think great leaders have a vision for where they want to go with whatever institution they're leading, and they're very good at bringing people in to help them, and they delegate to those people and empower those people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a great way to close. Al, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the Indiana 250 podcast. I want to thank you for all your incredible work and advocacy on so many fronts, your leadership through the years, of course, in Indiana, but way beyond Indiana, but your continued advocacy on important matters for Hoosiers and beyond on healthcare reform and education reform. You've picked causes that touch everybody's lives. So thank you so much for your leadership, Al.
Well, no, thanks for giving me this opportunity, and thanks for all of what you have done and all your support for so many important causes. So
thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, Al.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. To learn more about other leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list, go to indiana250.com and look for a Page 2 feature each week in IBJ. We'll be back with the new Indiana 250 off-the-record conversation soon.